Valve raised Steam Deck OLED prices by roughly 45% without adding faster hardware, a new screen, or any performance upgrade. Third-party estimates now suggest weekly sales may have fallen by as much as 82% after the increase, although Valve has not confirmed that figure. Today, we are separating verified facts from dramatic headlines and deciding whether rising costs forced a reasonable correction or whether Valve damaged the product philosophy that made Steam Deck successful. First, the confirmed numbers establish the scale of the problem. Officially, Valve moved the 512GB OLED model from $549 to $789. Meanwhile, the 1TB OLED model rose from $649 to $949. Together, those increases land around 44 and 46%, depending on the model. Importantly, Valve blamed rising memory prices, storage costs, component pressure, and logistics problems rather than a hardware redesign. Nothing inside the machine became faster, newer, or more capable when the new prices appeared. Therefore, buyers are paying far more for essentially the same device. Second, the reported 82% sales collapse needs a warning label. Boiling Steam estimated the decline by examining Steam's global weekly top seller chart, which ranks products by gross revenue rather than exact unit sales. Analysts then used assumed revenue bands, likely model mixes, and estimated selling prices to calculate possible weekly totals. Tech4 Gamers repeated the estimate as a fall from roughly 11,000 to 18,000 units per week to around 1,400 to 3,000. Tweaktown also warned that these figures remain estimates because Valve has not released official shipment data. Later chart movements suggested some recovery, meaning one ugly ranking period should not become a permanent obituary. Still, the available evidence points toward weaker demand after the increase, even if the precise percentage remains uncertain. Third, the real conflict is larger than one controversial headline. Designers originally built Steam Deck around an idea: portable PC gaming should feel accessible, flexible, and practical rather than exclusive. Cost pressure now pushes against that idea because higher memory, storage, manufacturing, and shipping costs threaten the economics behind the device. Consumers see a familiar product with a much heavier receipt, while Valve sees a hardware line facing a harsher supply market. Both sides can be telling the truth while reaching opposite conclusions. Companies can need higher prices, while buyers can decide the product is no longer worth purchasing. Originally, Steam Deck succeeded because it made portable PC gaming easier to understand. Power was never the machine's defining advantage, and Valve never needed it to be. Its appeal came from a strong mix of price, Steam access, simple controls, suspend and resume, repair support, and a console-like interface. At $549, buyers could forgive the lower resolution, older processor design, Linux limitations, and uneven performance in demanding games. Value softened every compromise because the whole package felt honest. People recommended the deck by saying it was not perfect, but it made sense for the money. Now, that sentence has become far harder to defend. Once priced at $789, the smaller OLED model enters a different comparison class. Near $950, the 1TB version faces premium handhelds, gaming laptops, used devices, and modern consoles. Suddenly, every weakness receives more attention because higher prices create higher expectations. Although the 1280 by 800 OLED panel still looks good, it no longer feels generous at luxury pricing. Additionally, the custom AMD chip remains efficient, but it still uses older Zen 2 and RDNA 2 technology. Performance did not collapse overnight, yet the price changed how buyers judge that performance. Older hardware can remain useful for years, although usefulness and value are not identical. Rivals sharpen this problem because they offer different strengths at similar prices. Consider the ROG Ally X, which includes 1 TB of storage, 24 GB of memory, an 80 Wh battery, and a faster processor. Windows handhelds can deliver stronger performance and wider compatibility, especially for games blocked by anti-cheat systems. However, Windows remains awkward on small screens and often demands more setup, updates, and troubleshooting. SteamOS still feels cleaner, faster, and more focused for players who mainly use Steam. Trackpads also give the deck a real advantage in strategy games, older PC titles, and anything designed around mouse input. Consequently, the comparison is not a simple victory for one device. Rather, Valve now asks buyers to pay premium money for software convenience instead of premium performance. Convenience can support that strategy, but only when it outweighs the hardware gap. Nintendo has shown that weaker hardware can succeed when software, identity, and ease of use remain strong. Apple has shown that customers will pay more for integration when the full experience feels smoother. Management may believe SteamOS, library access, controls, repair options, and community support justify the new price. Yet those advantages already existed before the increase. Buyers receive no new benefit that explains why the receipt grew by several $100s. Supply pressure may explain the decision internally, but it does not strengthen the offer externally. Forum reaction reflects this split more clearly than the loudest headlines suggest. Some users call the new prices absurd and say the deck has become difficult to recommend. Others defend Valve because component costs are rising across the hardware market. Several owners say they still love their existing deck, but would not buy another at current prices. Such responses are not contradictory because ownership satisfaction and new purchase value are separate questions. Someone who paid the older price can remain happy, while believing the new price is poor. Equally, a person can respect Valve's work on SteamOS while rejecting this specific decision. Maturity means choosing comparison over loyalty or outrage. Brand loyalty makes that comparison harder because gamers often treat companies like sports teams. Goodwill follows Valve because Steam is useful, discounts are frequent, repair support exists, and PC gaming remains relatively open. Earned trust has value, but it should not operate like permanent immunity. Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, Epic, and Valve all make decisions based on business goals. None deserves automatic defense when a deal becomes worse for customers. Similarly, none becomes uniquely evil because costs rise or a product becomes expensive. One useful question remains, does the current product justify the current price against current alternatives? Under the old pricing, Steam Deck answered that question quickly. Current pricing makes the answer depend on how much someone values SteamOS, trackpads, portability, repair support, and a familiar library. Casual buyers usually do not want a long explanation before spending close to $1,000. They want one clear advantage that makes the choice feel obvious. Previously, that advantage was value. Modern pricing must sell experience, convenience, and ecosystem loyalty instead. Narrower appeal helps explain why demand may have weakened. Hardware economics also complicate the situation because Valve does not operate like a normal console company. Store revenue can continue long after the hardware sale because owners keep buying games through Steam. Ecosystem income may allow thinner margins, although Valve's exact costs, contracts, and profit targets remain private. Outsiders, therefore, cannot prove that the company is overcharging or losing money on each unit. Private numbers do not prevent consumers from comparing visible prices. Even a necessary price can be commercially damaging if buyers move toward competitors, used units, laptops, or consoles. Business necessity and market success are not the same thing. Strategically, Valve risks turning a broadly appealing gateway device into a narrower product, bought mainly by loyal enthusiasts. Steam Deck originally expanded the audience for PC gaming by reducing setup pain and lowering the cost of entry. That design philosophy mattered, because it gave the product a purpose beyond raw specifications. Higher pricing now threatens that purpose by making the device feel less accessible. Survival pressure may protect the hardware line in the short term, while weakening its original identity in the long term. This is the real versus structure, user-focused design philosophy against rising business pressure. Accordingly, the estimated sales decline should be treated as a warning rather than a final verdict. Revenue ranking changes suggest demand weakened after the increase. Estimated unit numbers make the possible scale easier to understand, but they should not be presented as confirmed shipments. Future weeks may show recovery, deeper decline, seasonal movement, or stronger competition. Potential responses include lower prices, a new model, stronger bundles, or waiting for component costs to improve. Rival manufacturers might also raise prices, making the deck look less extreme by comparison. Presently, buyers must judge the product that exists at the price currently charged. Portable use remains excellent for indie games, older releases, emulation, backlog play, and access to a large PC library. OLED improvements, battery gains, controls interface, and community tools still create a distinct experience. Credit is deserved because fair analysis should not pretend the product lost every advantage. Nevertheless, the device now carries a price that exposes every compromise it once hid. Weaknesses become easier to forgive when the price feels fair. Strengths become harder to celebrate when the same hardware approaches premium territory. Broadly, the pricing decision exposes a recurring industry problem. Publishers and hardware makers often preserve product margins by asking customers to carry inflation, shortages, and strategic mistakes. Sometimes that transfer is unavoidable, but repeated increases gradually change who the product is designed for. Accessibility disappears first, followed by casual interest, word-of-mouth recommendations, and eventually market momentum. Leadership may still sustain the deck through loyal users and store revenue, yet that outcome would represent survival through narrowing rather than future meaningful growth through broad appeal. Ultimately, Valve did not damage Steam Deck by making it worse. Pricing damaged Steam Deck by making its strongest argument less believable. These costs explain why the company acted, and the available evidence suggests those pressures are real. Consumer rejection explains why the decision may still fail, because buyers are not required to solve Valve's supply problem. Claims of an 82% collapse remain unconfirmed, but the direction of concern is credible. Demand appears weaker, recommendations have become more cautious, and the deck now competes in a harsher price bracket. Here is the definitive answer. Commercial survival gave Valve a credible reason to raise prices, but the new pricing still damaged the product's original design philosophy. Quality remains good, the software remains strong, and the hardware remains useful. Unfortunately, the deal is clearly worse because buyers pay much more without receiving a meaningful performance upgrade. Thus, Valve did not prove that Steam Deck is dead. Put differently, Valve proved that even a respected company can weaken its own best idea when business pressure overtakes consumer value. No brand is your friend, but no price increase is automatically robbery either. Rational buyers should respect the facts, compare the options, and walk away when the numbers stop making sense.